Your microphones are turned off to start. If you are on the phone, to unmute later on in the conversation, just press *6. You can also use nonverbal feedback options. So you can raise your hand by selecting the reactions or leave a message in the chat box. And if you are called into the meeting by phone, use *9 to raise your hand. So I'm going to give it over to Stephanie. So actually, first, I just want to introduce our team. So my name is Hannah. I am a planner with the City of Boston's Active Transportation Department. I'm also working with Dan Merrow, who is not here tonight, but he is the primary engineer working on this project. And Stephanie Suskin is the Active Transportation Director.
Hi.
And Susana is our Spanish interpreter for tonight. I'm also joined here by Alexandra and Alec and Sarah from Kittleson and Associates. They are also part of our team engineering team making this project happen. All right. Stephanie.
Thank you all for joining. I'm excited to see such a great turnout tonight. As you know, we will also be having the same meeting tomorrow. So if your neighbors missed out, they have another chance to join us tomorrow. At both meetings, we will review what we've done so far. We will talk about the streets that you'll potentially find speed humps on. We will provide updated concepts for the focus areas that we've been working on with you. And at the end, we'll talk about our next steps. The meeting tomorrow is the exact same time as today, so 7 p.m. Neighborhood Slow Streets is the City of Boston's traffic calming program. We focus on improving safety in a connected network of small neighborhood streets. We focus on building design changes to improve safety and slow speeds. And the posted speed limit in our neighborhood slow street zones is 20 miles an hour. The way that we approach design for neighborhood slow streets is a little different than what you might have experienced with other projects. So we begin by engaging with you, our neighbors in Boston, to prioritize key focus areas and get your thoughts on what needs to change in your neighborhood to make it safe. With our design, we prioritize people who are walking and biking, older adults, youth, and people with disabilities. We aim to reduce crashes that lead to serious injury or fatality through these design changes. So far, these are the ways that we have been hearing from you the most. We started with an initial letter and survey questions that were mailed in August 2020. Many of you, hopefully all of you, got a postcard or letter that was mailed in late October 2021. We had an interactive survey online available in 3 languages. We hosted an outdoor workshop in September. We had a virtual meeting last May, and we have been collecting your thoughts this whole time through a combination of an online feedback form, phone calls, emails, letters, any way that you could get in touch with us, we've heard from you. When we met, this is March, but I think it was May, we talked about initial design concepts that were based on your letters, your comments, with our observations of what was happening in the neighborhood. Since then, We've taken those design concepts, incorporated even more of your feedback. We've done an initial engineering review to understand what's constructible and what's not. And we are sharing tonight some of our initial designs. So I'm going to start first by talking about what you can expect to see throughout the zone. At all entrances to the neighborhood slow street zone, you will find 20-mile-per-hour signs and supplemental 20-mile-per-hour pavement markings. This lets people know that they're in a slow zone and that the speed limit is now 20. We also intend to add speed humps on many of the streets in your zone. Our speed humps are spaced 150 to 250 feet apart. We do not put them in front of driveways, and they do not have an impact on on-street parking. A reminder that speed humps are not speed bumps. Speed humps are gradual. They taper up and down and are about 12 to 14 feet long. They are not the type of abrupt, hard bumps that you find in a parking lot, for example. Speed humps are comfortable to drive over at 20 miles per hour. When we plan for speed humps, we take into consideration three big factors. The first is hills. We can't put speed humps on streets that are too steep. We also can't put speed humps where streets are curved. Drivers won't be able to see them, and we don't want to cause unnecessary incidents. We also take into account the needs of our emergency responders. So we have worked with them on guidance to apply to our speed hump plans to make sure that we are building streets that are safe for you every day, but don't add unnecessary delay when there's an emergency and people need to get through, whether that's a fire truck, an ambulance, or a police officer. I'm going to show you some zoomed in versions of this map in just a moment, but all of the street segments that are in blue indicate areas where you potentially will see speed humps. The segments that are in white are not eligible for speed humps related to some of the factors that I mentioned earlier. After the design review process, where these plans go through a lot of internal departments for feedback, we may not have speed humps on all of the streets that we potentially could have speed humps on. So in the upper part of the zone, the streets that we are considering for speed humps include Archdale Road between Washington Street and South Street, Moss Grove Avenue between South Street and Washington Street, South Street between Archdale and Washington. We are also looking at speed humps on Bradeen Street, Fawndale Road, Granfield Avenue, and Stellman Road on the other side of Washington Street. In the southern portion of the zone, we're looking at speed humps potentially on Firth, Bexley, Murray Hill, Basil, Lindal, and Florence. There are some sections of Florence Street that are not eligible for speed humps because of the curvature of the road or the grade of the road. It's a little bit too steep. I realize I should also say that Lesher Street, we are still investigating, but the number of driveways and other infrastructure on the street limit our ability to add speed humps on Lesher. So we have 3 focus areas that we have been working on with you. We're going to start at South Street at Archdale Street. So first, we're focusing here because of you. You told us that drivers come too fast and don't stop for people who are crossing on foot. The visibility is poor because of the curve in the road. And there are no accessible ramps or an obvious location where people should be crossing the street. So on the left is the concept that we shared with you in the spring. And on the right is our initial design, which takes into account your feedback from the spring, as well as a better understanding of what is possible and needed from an engineering basis. So there are a few changes that I'm going to go through. First, we heard from a lot of folks that they were still concerned that the curve of the street wasn't going to slow drivers down enough to make that crosswalk safe. So we have changed the curve a bit to improve visibility of the crosswalk and slow drivers down before they get there. The splitter island will also be changed a bit. So instead of being a full island, it will be concrete ridges so that it's mountable for fire trucks to be able to get through here without getting stuck. We also changed the proposed crosswalk to a raised crosswalk in response to requests. People in the crosswalk will be more visible and drivers on Archdale Road will be slowing down once more before they get into the Arboretum. I want to be clear that these pedestrian safety changes do come with parking trade-offs. As the city of Boston and in the Neighborhood Slow Streets program, we prioritize pedestrian safety over on-street parking. That doesn't mean that we don't care about your on-street parking. We do try to minimize that. But I want to make sure that you understand that you won't be able to park on crosswalks. You won't be able to park on South Street until after the crosswalk down here. And on Archdale Road, because of the 2 driveways and the new crosswalk, you won't be able to park on this side of Archdale. And to ensure visibility of the crosswalk, we've also restricted 1 additional parking space on the left-hand side just before. These are important to understand. Again, we want to make sure that no one is surprised, but these are the things that come with prioritizing pedestrian safety. I'm going to move over to Firth at Florence. So we are looking at this intersection because you told us that people drive too fast and they don't always stop for people in the crosswalk. Drivers don't always stay in their lanes around the curve. And because of the curve, drivers can sometimes be caught unaware of the crosswalk because they can't see it quite as well. In the spring, we gave you 2 options for this intersection. One was a crossing island and the other was a raised crosswalk. Our initial design, based on your feedback, is a raised crosswalk. There aren't a lot of changes between the concept and what we're proposing. We will be rebuilding a little bit more of the sidewalk to make sure that the ramps are accessible across Firth and across Florence. But for the most part, what you saw previously is what we're hoping to build. Again, there will be some parking changes, but not that much. there actually won't be any parking loss at this location because of the existence of the crosswalks today. However, we will be adding the curb extension along Healy Field, which will physically restrict you from parking in an area that is already marked no parking. And last of our focus areas is Florence Street. We added this stretch of Florence Street to the zone because we heard from a number of community members that just looking at Firth wasn't going to be enough, and we needed to look at more of Florence. Drivers do pick up speed on the straight section of Florence, and we also heard that people park on the wrong side of Florence where parking has been restricted. We shared 2 ideas and got a number of comments back on what you all preferred. We also worked internally to understand what was possible for the street. Right now, our initial design looks like this. I'm going to show it in a little more detail. So closest to Healy Field, we are proposing a raised crosswalk right between Sycamore and Harrison, which will help slow drivers down before they get to the curve. You'll also notice that we are proposing adding the double yellow center line that has faded away over the last couple of years, which should help clarify where drivers should be as they're traversing this area. We are also planning to use pavement markings to better mark where parking is allowed and where it is not. On the other half of Florence, we are proposing curb extensions and a new crosswalk at Brookdale. The curb extensions allow us to have not just that crosswalk at Brookdale over Florence, but also accessible ramps over Brookdale. We've also proposed curb extensions and a crosswalk over Marion, where today there is also not an accessible crossing. The curb extensions will also add a traffic calming effect for drivers who are coming around the curve either direction, but it does come with some additional parking restriction and changes, which we have heard from folks as potentially a problem. So I'll come back to that one. We just want to note that we have heard you and that we could look at removing those curb extensions and instead adding a speed hump on Florence, sort of in the area right here, to slow vehicles down as they're coming through this area, both coming out of the curve and heading into it. That would restore parking. And obviously we would continue with repainting the double yellow center line. In either case, again, a reminder that adding crosswalks means that we do have to restrict parking. You will not be allowed to park on crosswalks. You also won't be able to park on Florence where the curb extensions are. That improves visibility of those crosswalks for oncoming drivers. There will be parking along the curb between the curb extensions, but not up close to the corners of the street. And then very quickly, I'm going to hit what's next, and then we will come back for discussion. So first, we know that there's a lot of things going on, and we want to make sure that we're hitting all of your concerns. So we've definitely heard a lot about the other section of Florence that we haven't talked about as much, that's closer to Cummins Highway. We've also heard about issues at Murray Hill, and we are going to come back to you with some ideas and suggestions that we can design based on the things that you have told us and the ideas that you have had. We also will be sharing any additional changes to the plans that are based on the feedback that we're getting from you. both tonight and through the coming weeks as we circulate this information with all of the neighbors and make sure that we get your feedback. I want to emphasize that these plans can still change, and there are a number of ways that you can get in touch with us. We are hosting office hours from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Usually every other Wednesday, but because of the holidays, we have a couple more in December. You can sign up for these 15-minute appointments with the project team at the website on the screen. Hannah will also put it in the chat, and you'll get it via email afterwards. As you have already been doing, you can get in touch with us by mail, email, or phone. And we really hope that you share this information with your neighbors so that everyone knows what's coming and feels like they can still participate and give their voice. As much as we try to get in touch with all of you through our mailings and flyers and emails, we know that we miss people and that there's a lot going on at this time of year and during a pandemic. So we really appreciate your help in letting your neighbors know that they can get involved with the project. So with that, I'm going to go back and we can start talking through some of these questions that you have all been adding in the chat and by raising your hands. So Hannah, do you want to moderate this portion of the meeting?
Sure. So I'm just going to go over again. If you're on the phone, press *6 to unmute yourself and *9 to raise your hand. So I'm going to first call on Steve. Well, I'll ask Steve to unmute, and then you can ask your question.
Sure. Just wondering if we're still possibly looking at a reversal of Firth and Bexley in terms of the intersection there. And then I know it wasn't part of this plan, but we had talked to transportation quite a while ago about having another crosswalk near the Target on Washington Street. So those are two questions. Reversal of Firth and Bexley, and then the crosswalk.
So both of those are still in play. They are a separate project. All of the changes that we are proposing will work if those street directions are changed. Additional crosswalks on Washington Street are something that our colleagues here in the transportation department, you probably know Charlotte Fleetwood, she's one of your neighbors, is working to create plans for. So we will definitely share updates on that through this channel, although we are, it's not necessarily part of this project. We want to make sure that we're accommodating of that potential future.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Dennis?
Hi, thank you very much for allowing me to say a few words. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Currently, I coordinate an online group for the Prospect Hill Neighborhood Association, and I only learned about this entire project about maybe 2 weeks ago. There may be quite a few people from Prospect Hill in the call today. However, a vast majority of the neighborhood has not been included in this. It's also my understanding that the tail, or the pigtail, if you want to call it that, from Firth Road down to Marion Street was somewhat of a late addition to the project from the traffic department. What I wanted to touch base with you on is that about 25 years ago, Florence Street was completely rebuilt. And it's likely before any of your time, and it's long before slow streets existed. At the time, the rebuild of Florence Street dug it up all the way down to the dirt and completely rebuilt it. And at that time, there were numerous neighborhood meetings, including then City Councilor Rob Consalvo, directors of the transportation department, etc. And the neighborhood group, which was not included in this plan, at least not by name, voted to have a particular traffic pattern, a double yellow line, which was offset and accommodated parking along Florence Street. Within about 3 years after that, all of that was abandoned by the transportation department. And that's why the yellow line is no longer there. It's not missing just a few years, it's missing about 2 decades. And so I think one of the questions we're looking for is, why was that neighborhood approved plan abandoned? And why is this going to be any better? What I'm seeing from your plans is there are a number of parking spaces that are going to be eliminated along Florence Street, no matter which plan you use. And quite a few of those 6-deckers and a few other houses have no off-street parking. Right now, they can only park in front of their homes. Further, and this is something you have likely not taken into consideration, is that Marion Street and Harrison Street are both private ways. They are jointly owned by the abutters. And right now, all of the parking on that street is limited to the occupants only. There is little to no guest parking. So when somebody visits anybody on Marion Street or Harrison Street, and about 170 some odd units at Dale Village, those people use overflow parking by parking out on Florence Street. And most of it exists between Sycamore and Blakemore. So I think one of the things I would suggest, because people have not been included, we have never had any kind of answer from the transportation department as to why the approved plan by the neighborhood was not continued. And that included specifically banning parking on parts of Florence Street that you're presenting as a brand new plan. It's not. It was previously approved by the neighborhood groups. So I'm not going to question the fact that we need to mitigate traffic coming down Florence Street. I know for a fact there are quite a few people on this call looking at the participant list that want something done about it. But I think it's going to be more appropriate if you cut this back to the original plan to Firth Road for the lower South Street people and for the Healy to Cummins people that were actively engaged and regularly engaged. And let's get the Prospect Hill Association together with the Transportation Department, the City Council, and other people to see what other mitigation factors that we can put in for Florence Street, specifically from Blakemore down to Sycamore. I mean, I'm looking at some of these crosswalks, great idea. I'm seeing some blind sight corners that will be dangerous no matter how you lay them out. And I'm very concerned about it. Any crosswalk near Florence and Sycamore, nice idea. I assure you, as a senior with mobility issues, I will never cross there. I always cross further up the road for my own personal safety. But I think we deserve some answer from transportation as to why they completely turned their backs on the neighborhood group. While we've been inactive, we have not gone away. We still live here. And we've been struggling in the last few months just to get ourselves back on the list at the BPDA, at the ZBA, with various city councilors, with the Office of Neighborhood Services. It's been a struggle. And so I appreciate that you need to do this. I'm not going to say I'm against it. However, I think we need to have a different plan for Florence Street from Blakemore down to Firth. And I think there has to be better neighborhood engagement. I know there's a handful of people on this call from this area. I can connect with about 280 people, and they don't know anything about this. I've done my best to share this information as best I can through our communication means, but it's still an occult, unknown thing that's going on. So I'd like you to take that under
Yeah, hi, Dennis.
consideration.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing all of these concerns. We have heard this from you already. I will say again that this is still up for consideration. We mailed information to residents in the area, including in your neighborhood zone, and some of whom, yes, please don't. I'm telling you, I'm giving you an answer as to how we are doing our outreach, which was your question about not telling people. So you have found out about it. I'm very sorry that you didn't hear about it when we first started. However, we are at the point now where we are so happy to get feedback from residents who will be impacted by any changes to Florence Street, including you and your neighbors, some of whom have already scheduled office hours, have sent us emails, and have been in touch with us. I understand that you're frustrated that the transportation department walked away from an earlier plan. We do not pretend that this is all brand new and new ideas and that we're not basing it on work that has already been done. We are grateful for the work that neighborhood residents do to make sure that they're part of the process and that they hear about this and that they are engaged. What I heard from your emails and what I heard from you tonight was that you're interested in changes to Florence Street that reinforce the plan that you all decided was the best plan when Florence was rebuilt previously, which I understood to be parking along one side of the street with a double yellow center line to clarify which lane you would be in. That is largely what our plans show. I will tell you that I have heard from a number of people that they feel unsafe crossing Florence Street. People with children who go to the park, who walk around the neighborhood, especially now in the pandemic with so many more people at home. These plans reflect those questions and needs that we have heard as a city from other residents. I understand that the parking implications may not be acceptable, and that's okay. Again, these plans are still at a phase where we can make changes. We have heard from people in the field. Alexandra was out doing field work the other week and talked to someone about what potentially is happening here. We are taking all feedback seriously, and this is an opportunity to improve Florence Street now and not be waiting many years into the future for another potential project to come, which is why I wanted to make sure that it was part of the meeting tonight and why I was very clear to note that we have heard from a number of neighbors to rethink the specific design plan that we had sent in the mailer. So we're happy to continue a conversation with more neighbors. I understand that you have more to say, but there are other people with their hands raised and other questions in the chat. So I do want to keep us moving. We can come back and have another discussion about this, but I do want you to understand that we have heard you. I understand where you're coming from. I understand that you're frustrated that you didn't get the initial email from ONS. Like, we're trying our best to make up for that fact. And again, we can still change things. I understand that sometimes the mail isn't the most reliable. If you are not a registered voter of Boston, we don't have a specific address for you, and we do our best to send mail. We do send several thousand pieces of mail in this neighborhood to people who live in the area. We will add your addresses, just send them to us. We can add them to the list. You have all found out about this project and you have email because a number of you have been in touch with me via email. That's another way to get information. Just because you didn't get the postcard doesn't mean that you didn't hear about the meeting. So we're very excited to have you here. We're going to add you all to the email list, and we will definitely make sure that your mailing addresses are on our list if you give them to us. So with that, I'd like to move on to Mary so that we can keep this conversation going because we have limited amount of time and a lot of questions.
Hi, Mary. If you are on the phone, press *6 to unmute yourself. Or I think that you're actually on the computer. So you should have received a little pop-up and it said, okay, there you go.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I've been on Firth Road for over 30 years and I would not want to see the traffic direction changed. It works well. I would be in favor of speed humps, but I would ask you to send postcards to others who live on this street and see how they feel and go with the majority. Another thing, I have difficulty with one neighbor who parks for 3 and 4 weeks in front of where I live and will not move it. Supposedly, there's a state law that says you cannot park on the public street longer than 72 hours or you can be tagged. Yet when I call E5, they say, well, you know, if the neighbor lives on the street, it's legally registered, we're not going to bother him. Well, meanwhile, what do I do? Or people who make deliveries, people who want to visit, you know, there's no parking space. He's in it for 3-4 weeks. Yet he has a space in front of his house with a handicap placard that he uses just for himself, and yet takes this space also. So I don't understand why they will not enforce that 72-hour. It was supposed to be a state law. I'd like to see that be enforced. Also, you know, I think Rosendale could use an additional outside parking lot. The one that we have, many of the spaces are now being taken by the local little health organization there because they need parking. What else? And also, way in the past, they kept telling us that they were going to build an alternate route from Forest Hills to Rosendale Square, because during traffic hours, it's so congested, it's bumper to bumper, and you cannot move. And yet we never got this alternate route from Forest Hills going to Rosendale Square. What happened to that? So those were my concerns.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So I know you talked to me as well about a lot of these concerns. I just want to introduce you to Charlotte Fleetwood, who is also from BTD. And Charlotte, so we'll work with you, or please contact Charlotte about the updates about the progress on the street direction changes on Firth Road, and also potential signal changes at Firth Road and Washington Street.
Okay.
Charlotte, do you want
finished.
to share
I'm finished.
anything? Okay.
Yep, sorry. Yes, I'm very happy to discuss the direction change. You know, I chatted with Stephanie and Hannah about it, and we thought like it's probably better if we have a separate public process just for that question. And so we can really focus on the people who live on Firth Road as well as the people who live on Bexley, and talk about the pros and cons, because there are definitely some pros. There are a lot of pros, and you know, there will be some cons as well. So and I want to make sure that we reach out to the community of people who use the playing fields as well. And, you know, I know a lot of them don't, are maybe Spanish speaking. So I'm happy to chat with you and others, but I need to work on a plan just on outreach and a little like summary of what the pros and cons are. And we have all the information now to be able to do that. So, and then the path to Rosendale, you're talking about the off-road path. Is that what you meant?
I don't know what the name of it was, but they kept telling us they were going to create an alternate route from Forest Hills to Rosendale Square, but it's never been done.
Yep. So it's still an idea. It's a path, off-road path idea. You know, one of the challenges is when you create something brand new like that, we have to figure out like who's going to maintain it and who's going to, you know, which department is going to take ownership of it. And these are questions we didn't resolve, but maybe under a new administration, we'll be able to resolve it. So
Okay,
more to come on that.
thank you.
All right. So I'm now going to go to Karen, and I'm going to ask Stephanie if you can put the slides back on the screen, because Karen said she had a question about Archdale and South.
Hi, thank you all for this. Oh, thank you. That I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you, Hannah, for thinking of that. Okay, I'm at 4 Archdale Road. I only learned about this design a couple weeks ago when I got the information in the mail, so I haven't really had the chance to, you know, get in touch with your department or find out anything more. Initially, I thought that the slowdowns were further down on South Street, down near Steve Gagg's house, and I didn't realize that they were going to impact here. However, we had initially asked the city to consider a crosswalk because of the the little kids coming from Boston Outdoor Preschool Network, and they're crossing over to the Arboretum every day. And we had initially thought that, I don't, can I point with this? I don't know if it's, maybe I can't. I thought that they could,
Oh, there it is.
is there a pointer?
I see one.
Then, no, I don't know if I can though.
Yeah, I think it's me.
Oh, all right.
yeah.
What initially we were looking at a crosswalk closer to the bridge so that it wouldn't impact the parking in the street, because as it is, there's not enough parking for the people along Archdale Road. And so we didn't want to impact that. I do understand the need to sort of slow things down, but I guess it looks like it would take out maybe 4 or 6 cars, if I understand correctly, to put that cross.
Not quite that many.
How many?
So what we've done between the concept and the design that we're showing tonight is we've pushed this curb out so the crosswalk could be pushed down a little bit further. So it's 2 spaces for any crosswalk, because one on this side, one on this side, one in front of it. And then because we're squeezing this crosswalk in between driveways and other things, there's just not space for parking on this side, unless they're sort of in the driveway apron a little bit more. Alexandra, did I get that right from how you explained it?
Yes, and that would be in the travel lane if a vehicle parked in that space there.
Up here, yeah.
Right.
Well, I'll let the people, I think the people from 6 Archdale are on this call too. I'll let them comment on that. I will support whatever I see, from the neighbors, but Mike, I'm in 4. I'm concerned about that island that you've got there. I know you said that a fire engine could go over it, but I'm concerned about just like, I don't even know about backing out of my driveway into that. It's already
It will
fairly-
be, yeah, so it's at the same level as the road. It just has
so let me
a
explain to me,
texture.
just from my standpoint, from where I am exactly. If I want to back out and go down South Street, I can't. Or
Yes, you
can
can.
I?
Yeah, you can. You just drive right over it.
Okay, and so a garbage truck, an ambulance, a fire truck, the big trucks, the buses, everything coming down the street, because I have watched, there have been times when they've not been able to make the turn, and then now you're making the turn. It seems like it's even tighter. And so I don't know.
They're able to make this turn. It's pretty
I
much
can
the
tell you
same.
right now that they barely make the turn with it not being bumped out like that. I've
Yeah.
watched them get almost stuck sometimes. So, and I think I don't know how you're measuring it or how you're doing, but before maybe what you need to do is draw it on the street and see how they are gonna, before you do anything. But I'm very much opposed to putting that island there. I think what good does it serve? Tell me. I try to
So
explain
what
that
we
to you.
heard from when we first started and we were first looking at this intersection was that there's some confusion because it's not clear unless you see the signs, which not everyone sees the signs, that South Street, you have to make this turn. And so this island helps define the turn better for people coming down South Street. Again, it's barely an island. It's a concrete patch that is sort of a wavy concrete texture. Because we need people who are coming down South Street to be able to see this crosswalk very clearly. And because of the curve of the street, we really need them to be sort of right here, not out here or over there.
Why does the crosswalk need to be at that point? Why do you need it there? Why couldn't it be further down?
If it's further down, we're getting rid of all of this parking down here because of the curvature of the street again. This was the best balance between where the crosswalk could be and retaining as much parking as possible.
how many parking spaces? I mean, we're gonna lose 3 easily, 2 in front of Arch 6, 1 in front of 4.
So over here, there's another approximately 3 spaces that would be restricted.
And then also on the other side,
Yes, 1 space here.
and 1 on the other side too.
This is the 3
Yeah.
over here, inclusive. So you can start parking right here. So from this point where my arrow is back this way is 3 spaces.
So you're gonna
And there's
lose
1 here.
4, you're gonna lose 6, 7, 8, something like 9 spaces total with all of that. That's a lot of spaces. That's pretty hefty for this neighborhood, because there's 2, 3, people and that I don't know. I think you really, I don't want to take up time here. I just want to express my concerns that I think I'm not opposed to slowing things down. I know this can be, I've lived here 28 years, so I know what this corner looks like. I would really like, I think this needs to be a conversation with the residents at Archdale and the ones just out south on that corner, and to really look at this together with you and see, how we can draft this out and make it so.
Yeah,
I don't
thank
think we
you.
should be losing 9, 10 parking
So,
spaces.
so the Neighborhood Slow Streets program is not just about slowing speeds, but adding accessibility
Mhm.
and crosswalks. So not only are we adding these crosswalks, but they're also making the curb ramp accessible, which means that you're in a wheelchair, you can navigate this space, because lots of crosswalks are not accessible in the city of Boston.
Wheelchairs are very
yeah.
difficult on this, just so you know, the street is not, so my mom was living with me using a wheelchair on our streets, not so easy. So you might make it easy to cross the street, but it's not, unless you do something to all the sidewalks all along here, it's not an easy navigation even for a wheelchair along here. So that part. I
Yes,
would
we
beg
have
to,
a ways to go, but we are required by law to improve all crosswalks to be accessible crosswalks
I
where we
see,
are doing
okay.
them. So
I
Yeah.
see, okay.
that's what Hannah's getting to. We are at 7:53 and people
I
are
don't want
starting
to,
to
that's
drop.
why I
So yeah,
suggested if there's a
so
possibility
let's
to,
keep moving.
Yeah, I'm
Hannah, who's
gonna
next?
I'm gonna go to Matthew. Thank you for waiting
so,
patiently.
well, but so
Sorry.
how do we continue
Yeah,
this
so
conversation offline?
I will show that information at the end, but I just want to go to Matthew's.
Sure,
They've been waiting.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Looks like it's working. I'm Matthew, this is Dustin. We both live at 6 Archdale Road on the house here in the picture. Really thrilled to see some raised crosswalks to slow people down. I think whatever design has that incorporated into it will be a huge improvement already. I think Karen's right. I think we're losing nearly 9 spaces here, which is pretty detrimental for the people who live on this intersection. I don't know how common it is to make changes, but there are other parts of Boston that use resident stickers for parking. I find that on the weekends in particular, we get a lot of people going to visit the Arboretum who park on our street in our area. I don't know if resident parking stickers are feasible for a small section of road here, if that could reduce burden on the weekends. I know Dustin parks on the street right now, and this would be prohibitively far to continue to park with the current design. It seems like the island is taking 3 spots out on its own. About all I have to say.
No, I'll just second that. I think it's a great idea to slow traffic. I mean, we clearly have an issue with speed on this street. I do like the design. Again, I think the only issue would be limiting or taking away like 9 spots when it's already hard to find parking in this neighborhood.
I think that's all we've got.
That's it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to share the link where you can sign up for a 15-minute or just a chat with one of us, so that we can go into any of your questions a little bit more deeply. But also I just want to ask if anyone else has any more questions about this intersection or want us to go to any other of the designs so we can collect your feedback and get notes on that. All right. I see Ginny has raised their hand. All right, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. This is Carol, Ginny's wife. I wonder with that intersection that we were just looking at, as somebody who has had some mobility issues and likes to walk in the Arboretum, I often have to walk on South Street to enter rather than right under the bridge where there's a kind of a steep step up. So walking back from the corner of South and Bussey, facing traffic, I am on the side of the street where Karen lives. So the whatever that is, 4-6 Archdale Road, coming under the bridge. Pardon me? Yeah, on South Street, coming into Archdale Road. So I often am a little concerned coming under the bridge or at that curve as I approach going under the bridge towards Washington with the traffic, because there is no real sidewalk. And then if I stay on that side, facing traffic and go under the bridge, there's no real safe place to cross South Street, to be on the Arboretum side of South Street, which is where I live, on the odd side. So I'm wondering, is there a way to put the crosswalk closer to the bridge where there isn't any parking anyway right now? Like, is it because the curve, like, could we put a stop sign before you hit the bridge? Just like there's that stop sign on South Street right now.
Yeah, so stop signs where they aren't warranted result in people not obeying, which is what we've heard a lot about the stop sign at Lesher, because there are no vehicular conflicts, and so drivers are not inclined to actually stop.
Okay.
We're trying to solve for multiple issues with what we have proposed at this location, including the primary issue that we heard was how fast people are coming around that curve. In our initial conversations, we heard so much about how unsafe it was to walk on South Street to the Arboretum because drivers were flying through that corner, because the road hasn't been reconstructed in a while. So the sidewalks are not a full 6 inches above the roadbed in many places. And that it wasn't clear where we should cross, if anywhere, in that very large intersection. So we're trying to slow speeds, provide safe crossings, and make it easier for people to understand where to be in that very large intersection. So that's how we came to the plans that we've been sharing. We do want everyone's feedback. And we have heard the concerns with parking issues, and we will look into what else we can possibly do. But our goals here are those 3 things: slow down people coming around the curve, provide clear, safe crosswalks, and make it easier to understand how to operate within the intersection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have a lot of questions in the chat starting from a while ago, so I might just grab some of those, Hannah. So one of the first questions was physical restriction on Archdale or just paint markings. So it's a combination where we have a, go all the way back to that, where we have a curb extension that is your physical reminder that you cannot park there. On Archdale Road, where we're showing these lines, that is painted only because we have a utility line running underneath this, right where we would want to put the curb. So it's not physically possible to build a curb extension here. So that's what we're showing in this initial design. Also had a question from Sam. Will the drainage sinks be fixed as part of the Florence improvements? The roads have deteriorated significantly at the ends of Marion and Harrison with drainage issues, and perhaps the curb extensions would fix that. So yes, where we are proposing the curb extensions, we would be addressing the drainage at the intersections. As Dennis noted, we do have private streets in this area, so we can't do work on those streets. We will be doing drainage as relates to all of these curb extensions. And these two curb extensions that we had proposed would include drainage structures as well, because they are located within the public right-of-way. Not within the private right-of-way of Marion Street. So to the best of our ability, we will be looking at drainage. It may not fix all of the issues, but it will help at those intersections. All right. Ellen notes that on the speed hump map, the straight section of Florence was white, meaning not eligible for speed humps. That's correct. We have it white on the map because of the built changes that we have proposed in this area, including the raised crosswalk and the curb extensions. Again, understanding what we have been hearing from neighbors about Florence Street and the necessity of maintaining even more parking. We can look at adding potentially one more speed hump on Florence Street instead of the curb extensions to help slow speeds as we're coming around. Karen asks, how are we going to accommodate the cars that will need to park? So we have done our best, again, to balance the need for on-street parking with pedestrian safety and slowing speeds down on our streets. We are really trying hard to make sure that we are reaching a balance with the neighborhoods. This is something that we go through in all of our neighborhood slow street zones. You know, we will do our best, but there will be parking loss as a result of the new crosswalks that we are proposing in most locations. Moving on, got to Karen to raise her hand. Denise asks about changing Lindal Street as well. Is this part of another project? I agree on the crosswalk near Dunks and Target. So we will look at Lindal Street. We've heard a lot of concerns about how parking is happening, especially during busy times for the school. So we will be doing observations and coming back to you with some proposals. I personally hadn't heard about potentially changing any direction of Lindal Street. That doesn't mean that it's off the table. If folks are interested in that as something for us to look at, please let us know. I do think that we have, that it's complicated because of the school buses and how they need to route around the area. But that doesn't mean that we can't make any changes.
I just wanted to go back that someone also asked about eliminating the concurrent ped signal at the corner of Firth and Washington, which is out of the scope, but could it be done in advance of any decision about the direction on Firth Street?
Yep. So we've noted that, and we will pass it to your hopefully favorite neighbor, Charlotte, to look into. Michael asked if these efforts examine and or address commercial truck traffic through neighborhood side streets. Some streets currently have signs to restrict trucks, but more may be needed. So not specifically, because there are trucks that come through for sort of legitimate purposes of delivering packages, groceries, and other things that are needed in this area. So we do want to make sure that all of those can still happen. However, the addition of speed humps and other changes to the streets do tend to discourage heavy trucks from using the streets because it's uncomfortable for them to go over the speed humps. It doesn't mean that they can't or they won't. It's just less comfortable. I don't know of the efficacy of signs only for truck routing. I think we all are very familiar with the very large signs on Storrow Drive, and yet the constant Storrowing that happens. Similarly, truck restrictions in the Back Bay that you may be familiar with are not necessarily often flouted, but you can certainly ask neighbors in that part of the city and they will let you know that trucks do still use their streets. So we try to discourage it through design changes, not just signs. Resident parking passes. So there is a way for residents to request new resident parking zones. At this time, the city is not accepting new applications. However, the intention is for them to be available again starting in the new year, 2022. I've put the link in the chat for what the process is. It begins by talking with your neighbors and with your neighborhood liaison. And I believe she put her information in the chat at the beginning of the meeting if you want to pursue that. Moving through these. Elizabeth offers a comment about the Boston Outdoor Preschool Network, where her daughter was a student last year and over the summer. Starting in September, the program isn't meeting at the same location, so the parking for the preschool drop-off should be less of an issue if they continue to meet in the new location. Good to know. So Lori is very detail oriented and has asked a number of really great questions about research and methodology. I encouraged her to be in touch with the residents who organized for the Slow Street Zone to hear about their initial outreach and what they got from residents at that time. Survey predictors were quantitative relatedly to crash data. So I can't give a quantitative response to how that interfaces with crashes or with this program because it was before we began our efforts. EMS data for the city of Boston is available from, I believe, 2017, maybe a bit earlier. On our website, boston.gov/vision-0. So you can look at everywhere where a ambulance was called to respond to a traffic crash, as well as where fatalities have occurred that were a result of traffic crashes. But in general, the application materials and the program are separate. Let's see. Can you speak towards the possibility of resident parking passes? Yes, I put the link in the chat. Thanks for asking that one more time. And continuing through, There was data displayed that was aggregated to not identify individuals, bar graphs, and so on. I'm looking for it now. Okay, so thank you for the link, Lori. And I think you even have your hand up. So if you want to unmute, feel free, as I'm just reading your questions out loud, and perhaps it's better for you to say them yourself.
Okay, thank you. And I will be brief. It's almost time. So this is a public policy that's being offered here, and the outcome is critical. That is to prevent fatalities and injuries. It's important in public policy, though, to really understand the what you're working with to get to that outcome. And in terms of the application, I think it's important to look at it because these guys did a tremendous amount of work, surveying a lot of people, collecting the crash data that you referenced to me that you got from BTD, police, whatever. I would like to help promote the best policy possible. And in order to do that, you really do need to look at those data that these guys so carefully collected, see if it's still relevant today, and use it to your best advantage. So that's why I'm asking the question. It's not a research question to me. It's really, how do you build solid public policy? And that's all I want to say, really. And maybe we can have the folks tell us at the meeting tomorrow. I'm happy to come. And that's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for finding it, for linking it. And as I mentioned, we stopped keeping this type of thing because other neighborhoods thought, well, first, we didn't keep it because of privacy concerns. So all of the information that comes to the city is public record. And sometimes people who participate in community planning initiatives don't necessarily want their information shared. So I understand that a lot of this is anonymous. I just wanted to let you know that's why we don't keep that stuff anymore. We also don't encourage residents to do this because we don't actually want unpaid organizers to do all of the heavy lifting. The city should be responsible for doing that type of work. And that's what we have been trying to do through our process and our outreach. We always appreciate additional help from residents and encouraging their neighbors to participate and reaching out. And that's one of the reasons why we really see the Neighborhood Slow Streets program as a partnership between residents and the city. It's very much not meant to be the city is coming in and telling you what's changing, but that we are hearing from residents, we are observing them as professionals and determining where the issues are perceived and where they're real and what we can do using proven design tools to address them. So I'm happy to take another look through this document that neighbors came up with previously to see if there's any additional information that we haven't been able to collect through our process that can help better inform the work going forward. So thank you for making sure that we got that and that you made your point, because I think I otherwise would have been on a totally different, like, what survey? The survey that we did kind of level. So thank you. Dennis offers that the drains on Florence Street at Marion are the city responsibility, and the drain is on Florence at Harrison also. Again, if we're rebuilding those curbs and building curb extensions, we would be addressing drainage issues and adding catch basins and other things to make sure that we aren't causing puddling as much as possible, or in your words, a lake. Hannah, have you seen any other, Karen asks, do you track how many people walk in a neighborhood to determine where you need to invest in crosswalks? So crosswalks are kind of a chicken and the egg situation. People do cross the street where there aren't crosswalks because they have to cross the street and there isn't any other way to do it. But people also who are more safety minded and who might avoid certain areas because it's not safe, because there isn't a crosswalk, won't cross there. So while we do look at crossing volumes in a number of situations in the Neighborhood Slow Streets program, we aren't reliant on that because the neighborhoods are selected based on criteria that include being near important places, such as schools, parks, libraries, and other places where that we call pedestrian generators, which is like kind of a weird term, but just means that we see a lot of people on foot because that's a destination that people want to go to. And the Arboretum is definitely a location that people want to go to. So in some places we do count how many people are crossing, but in these locations we have not. All right, so I think I got through everything in the chat. Thank you all for being so engaging and offering so much. I have gotten through everything, so I'm happy to come back to people. Hannah and Alexandra and the team and I can stay until 8:30 with interpretation. We can stay a little bit later without. Again, we are meeting tomorrow night at 7. You can find the link on our website, boston.gov/slow-streets/lower south. Information, including that link, was also emailed out, and Hannah put the direct link in the chat. So it's in there. If you want to save the chat, you can. There are 3 buttons next to the smiley face. And you should be able to click save chat. And so you can go back and look at all of the questions and look at all of the links on your own time. But please do stay in touch with us. Come back tomorrow if you want. Sign up for our emails, send us an email, make an appointment to chat with us. Make sure that we have your mailing address so that you can get a postcard next time we send one. The presentation and the recordings will be on the website probably in about a week because we do need to get it uploaded and also actually translate all of the materials. So we'll send out an email when everything is available. And by we, I mean Hannah. She's really doing the lion's share of the work on this. So all of the thanks to Hannah for getting everyone together and up to date. But again, happy to stay for a little bit longer if people want to stay. If you're ready to go because it's getting late, feel free to do that as well. And I will stop talking so that other people can take space. Matthew, you can talk again.
Yeah, sorry, I heard you mention utilities and the crosswalk on Archdale and that the curb extension was not feasible. Does that mean the crosswalk will not be raised either?
No, because the crosswalk is built out of asphalt and not, it can go there. The issue is that we use granite curbs and they have to go down pretty deep in the street. And they can't be directly on top of a utility pipe because that would block access in case there needed to be work on that specific pipe. But because the raised crosswalk is asphalt, they can cut through that much easier.
Great. Thank you. That was it.
Karen, you're up.
Hi, all right. I was just thinking of another thing when you're talking about the work on Archdale Road. To what extent are you, I mean, it took, I think, something like over 20 years to repave Archdale Road. I know that it started way back when Rob Consalvo was counselor, or even maybe when Dan was counselor. It's been a while because I know the utilities and the water pipe, from what I know, is very high up. And so they had to do a very special thing in order to even just pave the street. So that only got done very recent, like I think just maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't know any of the work that you'd want to do, to what extent it's, going to be a problem for the street itself. I was just curious how much you looked at that.
So any of the work that we do includes close coordination with our Public Works Department that oversees all aspects of roadway resurfacing in Boston, including understanding what the quality of the pavement is. As I mentioned, we have detailed information about what's underground and where it's located, and work around that to the best of our ability. For a project like this, it would likely come with additional resurfacing of the roadway in the areas that we are making changes. So we're only upgrading, we're not downgrading any of the qualities of the roadway.
No, I understand that. Just in terms of just being aware of how, you know, sensitive the road is already. But the other question I have, when you talk about a raised crosswalk, it's sort of like a hump and not a bump. It goes up and you go over and come down. Is that how it is?
Yes. So it's at the same level as the sidewalk. So in a lot of places in Boston, that's 6 inches. Here, it's a little bit lower. So it is a slope up. It's flat on the top and then a slope back down. You can see raised crosswalks on Center Street. I think we're also building some in Rossi Square as part of the MBTA bus improvements. So it's very similar to those in terms of how it will be constructed and what it will look like. Because
I see them a lot in Brookline, and they have going into the crosswalk, there's like white line, zebra line, or little lines coming in so that you become aware of, but I don't see anything marked on the road here. Would there be a marking coming into it? No, like, you know, even
we
like
we don't do advanced markings in Boston.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason for that, or?
There are design requirements on what their length needs to be, and that's often not feasible on our streets because we are the lower South Street, no, not contentious. The lower South Street zone is one of 15 neighborhood slow street zones. We're actually moving pretty aggressively to add a lot more traffic calming on our streets in response to sort of overwhelming community demand. And so what we have found is that we need to use details that make sense in all of the neighborhoods that we're working on in order for us to properly maintain them and build them. And so although Archdale Road has plenty of space for all those advanced markings, other locations that we're building don't. And so we rely instead on the chevron at the front, and there will be advanced signs as well that will say raised crossing or speed hump. The signs are especially useful for our snowplow drivers. We give them all the
That's what I was going to
information.
ask you. What happens to the
So they get
snowplow?
maps ahead of plowing season about where to expect weird stuff on our streets, including speed humps, raised crosswalks, bike lanes, whatever else is out there. So as they're coming through the neighborhood, they do understand what to expect. But the signs are what helps them be like, okay, I got to lift the blade a little bit higher to go through this, or I understand what's coming up. Because obviously the snow is blocking any markings and all markings on the street.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think that we're going to wrap up here in a minute. Thank you everybody for joining again and joining in this conversation with your neighbors. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to post a recording of this meeting online and share the presentation by email as well. So you will receive links to all of this information and can rewatch it and share it with as many people as you want. Tomorrow, the meeting will be at the same time, 7 p.m. and share the exact same content. So if you want to join again, or you just know somebody who couldn't make it today, please share that with them. So thank you so much and have a great night today. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.